For 3.5 years, not a single drop of rain had touched the land of Israel. Crops withered, children cried from thirst, and the people had forgotten their God. But one man, a prophet of fire, would confront a king, challenge a nation, and call down heaven itself. This is the story of Elijah and the day fire fell on Mount Carmel. It was a terrible time in Israel. The sun burned hot every single day. There was no rain, not even a drop, for 3 whole years. Rivers dried up. Wells became empty. The once green grass turned brown and died. Trees lost their leaves. The ground cracked into pieces under the heat. People walked slowly under the sun, feeling weak. Their lips were dry. They felt tired and hopeless. Mothers cried as their children begged for water. Animals fell to the ground, too weak to stand. Cows, sheep, goats, they had no food to eat, no water to drink. Why did this happen? Because the people of Israel had turned away from the true God. They began to worship Baal, a false god that could not see, hear, or speak. King Ahab, their leader, and his wife Queen Jezebel built many altars to Baal. They led everyone into sin, telling them that Baal was the god who brought rain and made crops grow. But the Lord was not pleased. He wanted his people to remember that he alone was God. So he sent a drought as a warning. Yet, even in their suffering, the people did not turn back to God. They kept following Baal, hoping he would help them. But there was one man who still trusted God with all his heart. His name was Elijah. He was not afraid to speak God's truth, even when everyone else was wrong. God was about to use Elijah to show Israel that he alone is the true and living God. Elijah was a brave prophet of God. He wore simple clothes, a rough brown cloak, and a leather belt around his waist. He lived far from the palace, eating what God provided, and he spent his days praying and listening to God's voice. One day, God spoke to Elijah and said, "Go, show yourself to King Ahab, and I will send rain upon the land." Elijah did not hesitate. He walked many miles under the hot sun, past dry lands and thirsty animals, until he reached the grand palace. People whispered as he passed by, "That is Elijah, the man who told the king there would be no rain." Some were angry at him, blaming him for their suffering, but Elijah knew he was only doing God's will. When Elijah stood before King Ahab, the king shouted in anger, "Is it you, Elijah, you troublemaker of Israel?" But Elijah was not afraid. He said firmly, "I am not the troublemaker. You and your family are the ones troubling Israel. You have turned away from the Lord and worshipped Baal instead." Then Elijah told the king, "Gather all the people of Israel. Bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah. Meet me on Mount Carmel." King Ahab was curious and desperate. He wanted the drought to end. So he agreed and sent messages across the land, telling everyone to come to Mount Carmel. Elijah stood alone against a king and a nation, but he knew he was never truly alone. God was with him, and soon all of Israel would see the power of the true God. Early the next morning, the people of Israel gathered on Mount Carmel. The mountain was filled with men, women, and children, all curious to see what would happen. They stood in the hot sun, whispering among themselves. The 450 prophets of Baal stood together in their bright robes, holding their staffs, proud and confident. They smiled and laughed at Elijah, thinking he would soon be defeated. Elijah stood alone, his brown cloak blowing in the breeze. But his face was calm. His eyes were filled with confidence, because he knew the true God was with him. Elijah raised his voice so everyone could hear, "How long will you keep changing your minds? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." The people were silent. They looked at each other but did not answer. They were afraid of King Ahab and confused by the false prophets. Then Elijah declared, "Let's have a challenge to see who the true God is. Bring 2 bulls. The prophets of Baal will choose one, and I will take the other. They will prepare their bull for sacrifice and place it on the wood, but they must not set fire to it. I will do the same with my bull. Then they will call on the name of their God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by sending fire from heaven. He is the true God." The people nodded and shouted, "That is a good idea." The challenge was set. The mountain fell silent as everyone waited to see which God would answer with fire. The prophets of Baal were quick to act. They chose their bull, the best and strongest one. They cut it into pieces and placed it neatly on the wood of their stone altar. Their faces shone with pride. The people watched quietly, wondering what would happen next. The prophets of Baal began their rituals. They danced around the altar, clapped their hands, and shouted loudly, "O Baal, answer us." From morning until noon, they kept shouting. Their voices became hoarse. Sweat poured down their faces. But there was no voice. No one answered. At noon, Elijah began to laugh. He shouted to them, "Shout louder. Surely your God is a God. Maybe he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened." The prophets of Baal grew desperate. They shouted louder and louder. Some of them cut themselves with knives and swords until blood flowed, thinking Baal would see their pain and answer. But the sky remained silent. There was no fire, no voice. No one listened. The people began to whisper, wondering if Baal was truly a god after all. They looked at Elijah, who stood calmly by his altar. His eyes were full of peace because he knew his God was alive. Evening came. The prophets of Baal were exhausted. They had tried everything, but their God did not answer. It was now Elijah's turn to show Israel the power of the Lord. The prophets of Baal had been shouting since morning. Now, the hot sun was sinking low, painting the sky orange and gold. The people stood silently, tired and hungry, watching the prophets of Baal grow weaker by the hour. Some prophets sat down on the dusty ground, their heads in their hands, breathing heavily. Others kept shouting, their voices cracked and painful. Blood stained their arms and legs from the cuts they made to please Baal. But still, there was no answer. The sky remained silent. No fire fell from heaven. No voice spoke to them. The people began to realize that Baal was not a god at all. Some mothers hugged their children tightly. Some old men shook their heads sadly. Elijah watched calmly. He knew this was the moment God would show his glory. As the sun began to set, Elijah stepped forward. His strong voice broke the silence. "Enough! It is my turn now." The prophets of Baal stepped aside, tired and defeated. Their eyes were full of shame and confusion. They had trusted a false god that had no power to save. The people turned their eyes to Elijah. He was just one man, standing alone against 450 prophets. Yet, his face shone with confidence and peace. He knew he served the living God, the God who sees, hears, and answers his children. The mountain became quiet. Even the birds stopped singing as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Would Elijah's God answer with fire? Or would he be silent like Baal? The people held their breath as Elijah prepared for the greatest miracle they had ever seen. Elijah called out to the people, "Come closer to me." The crowd moved forward, gathering around Elijah to see clearly. Mothers carried their children on their backs, young men pushed forward, and old men leaned on their sticks, eager to witness what this man of God would do. Elijah looked at the broken altar of the Lord. It was old and ruined because the people had stopped worshiping God. Carefully, he began to rebuild it. He chose 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel, reminding them of who they were, God's chosen people. As he placed each stone, he called out their names: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, all the way to Benjamin. Then he dug a deep trench around the altar. The people whispered among themselves, wondering what he was doing. Elijah arranged the wood on top of the stones. He took the pieces of the bull and laid them neatly on the wood, just as God had instructed. Then he turned to the people and said something surprising: "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood." Men rushed to bring heavy jars filled with water from the nearby spring. They poured the water over the sacrifice. The wood became soaked. "Do it again," Elijah said. They did it again. Water dripped down the wood and stones. "Do it a third time," he commanded. They obeyed. Water ran down into the trench, filling it completely. The people were amazed. They thought, "How will it catch fire now? Wet wood cannot burn." But Elijah wanted everyone to know that this miracle was from God alone, not from any trick of man. As the last jar was poured, water streamed down the sides of the altar. The sacrifice was dripping wet. The wood was soaked. The trench around the altar was now a pool of water. The people were shocked. They whispered to each other, "Why is Elijah wasting water when we have so little left?" Others said, "How can fire burn wet wood? What is he doing?" But Elijah stood calmly, watching the water run down. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was making it impossible for anyone to say the fire came from him. The prophets of Baal looked on in confusion and fear. They had danced, shouted, and cut themselves all day, but their God did not answer. Now Elijah was making it harder for his God to answer, or so they thought. Elijah stepped back from the altar. He lifted his hands to heaven. The people fell silent. Children clutched their mothers. Even King Ahab leaned forward, watching with wide eyes. Elijah took a deep breath and prayed a simple but powerful prayer. He did not dance or shout or cut himself. He did not perform any tricks. He simply trusted God with all his heart. As he prayed, the sky grew darker. The cool evening breeze blew across the mountain. The people held their breath, waiting to see what would happen. Would the God of Elijah answer by fire? Or would he remain silent like Baal? The world seemed to stop as Elijah's quiet prayer rose up to heaven. Elijah prayed with all his heart. "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant. Answer me, Lord, so these people will know that you are God and that you are turning their hearts back again." As soon as he finished praying, suddenly the sky split open with a bright, blinding light. A mighty fire fell from heaven, roaring like thunder. It crashed onto the altar. The people screamed in shock and fell to the ground. The fire burned the sacrifice completely. It burned the wood, the stones, and even the soil beneath the altar. The water in the trench sizzled and steamed until it was all gone. The fire of the Lord was so powerful that nothing was left. The people fell on their faces, trembling with fear and wonder. They cried out together, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." The prophets of Baal stood with their mouths open in terror. Their God had failed them. The true God had shown His mighty power before everyone. Elijah looked at the people and said, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Do not let any of them escape." The people obeyed. They caught all the false prophets and took them down to the Kishon Valley where they were punished for leading Israel astray. That day, Israel saw with their own eyes that the Lord is the only true God. Their hearts were filled with fear, but also with hope, for they knew God still loved them and wanted to bring them back to Him. After the miracle, Elijah turned to King Ahab and said, "Go, eat and drink, for there is the sound of heavy rain." But the sky was still clear. There was no sign of rain. Yet Elijah knew God would keep His promise. Elijah climbed back up to the top of Mount Carmel. He knelt down with his face between his knees and prayed earnestly for rain. He told his servant, "Go and look towards the sea." The servant went and looked, but he said, "There is nothing there." Elijah said, "Go back 7 times. On the 7th time, the servant shouted, "I see a small cloud as small as a man's hand rising from the sea." Elijah stood up quickly. He said to his servant, "Go and tell Ahab, hurry down before the rain stops you." Soon, the sky turned dark with clouds. Strong winds blew across the land. And suddenly, heavy rain poured down from heaven. The people lifted their faces to the sky, laughing and crying as the cool rain fell on their dry skin. Children danced in puddles. Farmers lifted their hands and praised God. God had shown Israel that He alone was powerful. He ended the drought and blessed them again. Elijah ran ahead of King Ahab's chariot all the way to Jezreel, strong with the power of God. This story shows us that even if we stand alone for God, He will stand with us. He is powerful, faithful, and He answers the prayers of His children. Trust in Him, for the Lord, He is God. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more interesting Bible stories. Like, share, and comment.